There we go. Let's get our Facebook folks here, fine and dandy and rolling. Let's see, and got the spinning wheels before we're officially taking off. All right, there we go. Welcome in, welcome in. It is Monday morning, the 17th. Happy President's Day. If anybody's got work off, I do. I'm heading down to the aquarium with my son and wife, so that'll be fun. Haven't done that since being out here in Seattle. And welcome in, Eric. Of course, it's your first show officially, our first show officially as a co-host of Broncos for Breakfast. Just hopped off the Falcons show with Scott, and now we're here. I always get to complain that I'm up super early. I guess you're trumping me here. What is it? 5:30 out there? 4:30 out there? What's going on? How are you doing?
Doing good. Yeah, it's a wonderful 5:45 in the morning. I've been up for an hour, unfortunately, but it allowed me to get some work done before, the show. And then after the show, I'm gonna go and put my butt back in bed, lay down, and get some more sleep.
Man, I have a really hard time falling back asleep once I'm up. I feel like I get like a fever, like I'm like a sweat napper. Disgusting. I know everybody's tuning out. Drop the thumbs up if you're a sweat napper in the chat, folks. But no, it's good to have you. I think last night we had a kind of just a little meeting before we did this, and you broke my heart a little bit. I'm gonna have to call you out here, Eric. Not a coffee drinker. So folks, we're gonna have to really work on him in the chat. It's not too late for anybody. I fully believe that. You can have a wrong opinion and change that. Just kind of like I wasn't a Bo Nix believer, and now I'm like, hey, franchise quarterback, sign me the heck up. New evidence can change your mind. That's great. So, chat, we got to work on Eric here with some coffee. Eventually, we're going to get you, buddy. But no, that's okay. It really gets me through a lot of these shows. Now, let's say hello to people in the chat trickling in here. Didn't even mean to work a pun in there, Eric. David says, morning, Nick and Eric, less than a month away from the start of the new league year and free agent, first time in 8 years, not looking for a quarterback, general manager, or head coach. So sweet. I mean, David, I think I don't know if I talked about it on this show, but we have a incredible alignment right here for the Broncos and stability going forward, because it's not just quarterback, general manager, head coach, but the ownership stuff as well, right? We had that Bolin Trust. So you have all four of those pillars set for long-term stability. It's one reason when people talk about like, oh, the Broncos are still 2 off seasons away from really being contenders. I think that's probably true, but you have a chance if you roll the dice right this season, you're competing with anybody in the league. And Nick's taking a step up. A lot of things have to go right, but with those things set, stable, Denver is in a very good spot compared to a lot of their peers league-wide.
Yeah, I mean, it first started by getting the general manager down, and then we had the ownership kind of get settled, and then we had Sean Payton come in. So step by step, they built up those key points of stability that are needed. And here we are going into this offseason, as David says, we don't have to worry about all that. And honestly, as we get into the draft season, especially, I'm at a loss with what to do because there's no really reason to talk about these quarterbacks. And after almost 10 years of having to talk about quarterbacks, it's nice, it's refreshing, but it's also, just leads to being a little lost when it comes to, evaluating the draft a little bit.
It's great, though, because you have like a little bit more of a holistic approach, right? Like the quarterback's the one thing we always talk about on here. Don't reach for talent. Maybe it's a little bit aggressive to trade up. Quarterback operates so different because if you hit on that guy, it changes everything. Offensive line, pass weapons, whatever, blah, blah, blah. You're going to have chances at that. But the train, as I've said on here, the train doesn't leave the station until you have that quarterback. We're still going to wait and see to what extent Denver has that quarterback. Is he going to work into that tier of, I think right now there's a pretty clear top 4 in the NFL. But we don't have to answer that question. We don't even have to have that answer that question after next season. Right now it's like, is Bo Nix a positive player compared to the dollar spent on him in his rookie contract? I think it's going to be pretty likely to be yes. It's already been yes on that. I think it's going to continue to be yes on that. We'll answer the big questions later on when we have to. Right now, there's no need. Right now, it's just gear up, rookie contract. Let's freaking go. We have the hourglass has been tipped. I don't know. You play Taboo. If the hourglass has been tipped, tick-tock. We're in a window right now.
Yeah, I mean, with Bo Nix, and as you're saying, we don't have to have that conversation about him being a top 4 quarterback, as long as we can sit here and talk about him being a top 16 quarterback. And if you can get these pieces around him, and he is a top 16 quarterback, at least he was last season, despite NFL.com's recent rankings of quarterbacks. And there's plenty of reasons to be optimistic about him getting better. And as we go forward over the next, 2-3 seasons of his rookie contract, to where we can start having that conversation of, is he, top 5 quarter or top 4 quarterback? Is he a top 6, top 8, so on and so forth? And the Broncos, Sean Payton, George Payton, the owners, there is a lot they can do to help him out, especially this offseason. They have enough cap space. They have reasonable ways to create even more cap space to go add these key pieces around him and in free agency through the draft and help him take that next step forward by providing him with more talent to work with.
Absolutely. Talk about talent. We got Todd coming in here, says, good morning, Broncos for breakfast in Broncos country. We got Coach Chris coming in saying new logo too, rolling out the red carpet for Eric. Yeah, that was, I was like, Chad, we need a new one. It's got like Bo Nix's practice jersey on him. You know, it's like, we got something, we need something new here. So great to see that new logo. We got Jeremy coming in, says, morning boys, welcome Eric. Mock my face off. Oh man, we're going to mock your face off. That's if you like mock drafts and talking the draft, we're going to be doing a lot of that. Probably not the 2026 just yet, but that's a-okay. We got our guy Naj coming in here, 1999, says, hey brothers, just dropping in to show some love. Thank you so much, Naj. I honestly, one of the highlights of, it's always great to see Eric and Chad and everybody too, but one of the highlights of the meet and greet that we have every year has been seeing you, just because the energy you bring, the positivity. I mean, it's just like, who needs Eric doesn't need coffee if he had your energy or you around. So shout out to you, Naj, one of the truly great folks, nice guys out there. So really appreciate you and just the radiant energy that you bring.
And he also has two of my favorite stories involving the meet and greets. Of year one, him getting snapped at by Chad, I guess, in a way, to watch his language while we were live. And then this last year, we did that the post game show live and everything. And I ended up in the elevator with Naj, and Naj didn't realize it was me. And I started talking to him and creeped him out a little bit at first. But Naj, it's great to see him, man. And also, what Nick said, gotta echo it. You are one of the nicest guys to talk to, one of the nicest guys I've ever met. It's always a joy to see you. And glad to see you here joining us. And thank you again for the donation.
Yeah, thank you so much. Colorado's in here. Morning all. Hope you're all doing great. Appreciate you guys hopping on every Monday morning to talk some ball. Helps with anxiety a lot. Well, sorry to hear about the anxiety, Colorado. But, yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of escapism out here and just, talk a little bit of football and just have this narrow view. I mean, maybe it's a little bit, small potatoes, but people place where they want to put their value. So not small potatoes for us by any means. We got Jeremy saying, who's in this new optimistic Nick? I always say that I don't think I'm optimistic or pessimistic. I just kind of try to call it as I see it. I'm going to be wrong sometimes, but that's okay. Quentin Caldwell, good morning, everyone. Great to see you, Quentin. Appreciate you coming in. We got the Ronk, Michael Ronquillo out there. He's also getting up early, hanging out with us, says, good morning, Nick and Eric on Broncos for breakfast. Go Bo Broncos. Go, Michael. Thank you so much for the stars. Anything you want to say, Eric, to Michael?
No, thank you. I mean, as I say every Friday night when you come in, we just can't thank you enough for your support every single show, every single week. Ronk, you truly are one of the stars of MHH and the community that we've created and built up here. And we appreciate you so much.
And not just in the chat, but on Twitter also. So Appreciate you, Michael. Roy comes in, says, good morning, Nick and Eric. Welcome to Broncos for breakfast. Don't forget the Lion coffee, Nick. I won't forget my Lion coffee. This is my emotional support thermos. Yeah, great. Hopefully we can get him. We'll get Eric maybe on some coffee here eventually. It's too good. We also got Rattlesnake Master coming in, $4.99. Thank you so much. RSM says, welcome Eric. Excited for the new chapter. This is my favorite time of year. Can't wait to learn more about this class. Love from Nebraska. Yeah, thank you so much, Rattlesnake Master. And you guys, I will fully, give Eric credit to this because I try to really get involved and know like the top 100 to 120 players. And then we get to, day 3 undrafted free agent guys. And I'm like, I'll learn after the fact, unless they played for Iowa, or Big Ten or something. But I really try to get to know like the top 100 to 120 every year and put in the work so I can speak very intelligently on those guys. But Eric will do, how many players do you typically get reports on? 300, 350? I mean,
it's normally up there. Normally, about at least 150 is what it's been. A couple years ago, I got with Lance Anderson's help, we got over 350 of them out. But I mean, I don't even get reports out on all the guys that I watch. My watch list is over 700 names long for this year alone, and that's after trimming it down. And I'll get at least some idea on every single one of them.
Yeah, so I always like kind of more of the top dogs, work with the first round grades, maybe not as many this season. But Eric, likes the underdogs. And speaking of underdogs today, they're, of course, sponsoring us once again. So shout out to them.
Yeah, this basketball season, when your favorite star scores a bucket, we're going to give you an alley-oop opportunity to win money from watching sports with Underdog. Underdog is one of the leading sports apps, and you can play now in your state. Do you want to win up to 1,000 times your money? You can with Underdog.
To play, choose whether a player will go higher or lower on one of their stats, such as points, assists, rebounds, and more. Underdog's got all your favorite leagues, teams, and stars to choose from. Create entries with all basketball picks or mix and match across sports. I mean, gosh, the hockey right now, right? That the Frozen Four or whatever, it's been electric as well. You can play with as little as $1, and if you get everything right, you can win up to 1,000 times your money. So turn $1 into 1,000 just with your hoops knowledge.
So download the Underdog app and sign up now using promo code MHuddle to unlock a special offer of up to $1,000 in bonus cash when you make your first deposit. Join in on the fun when you sign up with promo code MHuddle. Claim your special offer today and get up to $1,000 in bonus cash instantly upon your first deposit.
Must be 18 plus, 90 plus, Alabama, Nebraska, 19 plus in Colorado for some games, 21 plus in Massachusetts and Arizona, and present in a state where Underdog Fantasy operates. Terms apply, void in Colorado. Concerned with your play, call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit ncbgambling.org. Arizona, 1-800-NEXT-STEP or text NEXT-STEP to 53342. New York, call the 24/7 HOPE line at 1-877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. So appreciate that. We're going to keep on rocking here. Thank you so much. Producer Chad hanging out with us this morning with the code MHuddle on there. That was smart to think of. Let's see some more people coming in here hanging out, of course. We got Roberto says, Roberto Gomez, good morning to you, Roberto, says, why having ownership helps us manipulating the cap space. I'll give this first, Eric, just real quick, but it's all encompassing. You want to have wealthy owners. Broncos have the wealthiest owners in football, but you want them to empower correctly. You don't want the cons, right, who I think are still like overly involved. You don't want like Jerry Jones, right? And you also don't want like the McCaskies of the Bears, where like the football team is their source of revenue. That's not true for the Broncos. So having these wealthy owners in place everywhere but the cap, they can spend the maximum. Broncos' new training facilities is going to be the best in the NFL. Thank you. The medical staff, it's one of the best in the NFL. The ownership, there's no limit on that. The coaching staff, no limit on that. So it's putting money in areas where there is no limits, and also the cap stuff as well. But yeah, it's a big benefit for the Broncos.
Now, specifically with cap space, so when you sign a player to a contract, all the money in the contract has to go into escrow. Every NFL team gets a certain amount of cash from the NFL as, part of their allotment that they get for the money that they make through, TV deals and all that. And if you don't have rich owners, you can't supplement that with outside cash like you can when you have rich owners. And the biggest way that you use that to manipulate the cap space or work around the cap space is through bonuses. So all that money has to go into escrow when you sign the contract. So when you have bonuses, you can give a more hefty bonuses. You can give a bonus, a $10 million roster bonus, say, in the next season, keep their base salary this year low, and helps you work around the cap space that year one. And then you have that big bonus that kicks in. And that year is when it'll count against the camp. So when you have, eventually it all comes due on the salary cap. But when you have some tough years with, not having a lot in the salary cap, you can structure things that way for these big bonuses later on that help you work around the cap now. Yeah. It all does come due, as I said, but it just works with how you can structure contracts to work around it.
Yeah, so we'll see what the Broncos do with that. Obviously, they have the dead cap hit with Russell Wilson. That's an anchor on the cap no matter what they do. But those void years, they already started messing with that a little bit with restructuring McGlinchey and Powers last season. Maybe they'll end up doing that with Surtain or somebody else as well, because you can keep kicking it. At least that's where the collective bargaining is at right now. Maybe that changes at some point in the future, but it is. You look at the Eagles, right? They're paying all these guys absolutely nothing on the salary cap for this season. Down the road, the dead cap hits for the void years are pretty big, but I don't know. They're just betting on the growth of the cap in the league there, I guess. And also, there's something to be said about taking advantage of your window when you're in it. So thank you so much, Roberto, for the comment. Click a thumbs up, hang out with us. We're in here to hang out and talk ball. We got Adam coming in here. What's up, Broncos Maniacs? Great to see our guy Greg Smith. Good morning, Broncos for breakfast. New beginnings with Eric, Denver Broncos for life. Appreciate you so much coming in and hanging out with us as always. Yeah, shout out to Colorado says shout out to Bo Lowry. Yeah, just Broncos have done pretty good on that front. They're putting money in every area they can to make this a good team. I'm curious, Eric, back to that ownership conversation. That's not the point today. We're doing Mock Draft Monday, but when we have those postseason ownership grades that the teams like vote in on anonymously. Broncos, I'm right. They've been like pretty middle of the pack for a lot of things. That hopefully changes. Vikings are almost always number one up there in a bunch of stuff. They got owners who really do everything they can to help the players, both on the team and the legacy players. But the Chiefs are always like one of the worst teams, ownership group, really terrible locker rooms, facilities, food. They have Patrick Mahomes. They got Andy Reid, which I mean, you can argue what's a quarterback to that level can overmake the ownership stuff. But like over the next 5-10 years, I have to hope that the lack of great ownership in Kansas City can maybe chip away at the greatness that is Mahomes on the field.
Yeah, I mean, you have to assume at least as things go on and some of these key guys in the locker room retire, like Travis Kelsey, for example, if he retires this year, some of these loud voices and who may come to the defense of the owners as they start leaving, will other guys step up? And there are guys, I mean, it wasn't with the Chiefs, but there was a player last year who, after these grades came out, he flat out came out and said that's why he wanted to leave the team that he was with, that he was never going to consider re-signing with them because of how terrible the owners were. And it was like almost every single thing. They were like second or third worst graded on all of it. And so it does have an impact. And it's just when you have the right voices in the locker room, it can kind of help, ease those issues a little bit because these guys like, look, listen, we're contenders. We are consistent contenders. And the Chiefs can do that right now. And eventually you have to assume that that's going to stop. And we might see it eventually. Like the biggest nail for this might be when Andy Reid eventually retires.
Mm-hmm. We're still waiting about Travis Kelsey. There's a rumor out there today that maybe the Chiefs have called about Kyle Pitts. I'm not sure the validity to that rumor. It makes sense. What also makes sense is Eric Flynn coming in, supporting the show. Always great to see Eric over there on Facebook. We really do. I mean, appreciate all the star givers. Obviously, not everybody's in a position to do that. A lot of instability. Things are crazy expensive, but coming in and supporting us means so much and keeps the lights on, especially now that Chad's hanging out in the background. We got to be on our best behavior, and he's taking notes. So thank you so much, Eric, for coming in. And we want to get into the mock draft today. Eric's mock went up today. We were kind of, talk with Chad. You guys love the mock drafts. We love the mock drafts. So Eric, again, a little deeper than I am in all these classes. He's doing a full 7-round mock. I'm going to be hitting top 3, maybe top 4 at some point. I already have a hard enough time with the word count on 3 rounds. It'd be a freaking novel if I had to do 7. But we're going to get into Eric's mock draft here, which is release day. You can check it out over on Mile High Huddle. And Eric, guys, it's Chad running in the background here. But your first pick, somebody that I really like, a position group that I really like. You got Walter Nolan, interior defensive lineman from Ole Miss, former super recruit, part of that unbelievable paid class that Texas A&M brought in. And he transferred to Ole Miss this season. Always been incredibly talented. But finally looked like he started to get it together this season. And what do you think there? Pick 20 overall. I think that's fine value for the tape analysis for me. That's good value for the tape analysis.
Yeah, so I don't know about you when you make yours. I always use a simulator for it. I typically use Pro Football Focus just to, add that extra element of, I'm not just going to pick players and put them here. There's some element of the draft to it. And, I mentioned in the article, the top 3 guys that you look at, Ashton Jeanty, Tyler Warren, Colston Loveland, they were all off. So I took a guy who was the best player left in my view, in Walter Nolan, that fills a more significant need than a lot of Broncos country thinks about with the interior defensive line. I mean, we're set to lose DJ Jones. We have John Franklin Myers on the last year of his deal, Zach Allen on the last year of his deal, even though expectation is still get extended, and Malcolm Roach on the last end of his last year of his deal. Not to mention Jordan Jackson. He's still I believe a restricted free agent this year, might be exclusive rights. I can't remember exactly. And so he's coming up to that point where he's no longer cost efficient. Matt Henningsen is coming up to where he's no longer cost efficient. And Uwazurike is also coming up to where he's not cost efficient. And so Walter Nolan, best player left, fills a big need. I think he's a very talented player that can fit extremely well with what Vance Joseph does in defensively. And he fits with the timeline. He doesn't have to come in and start right away. You can sit him as a depth guy, a rotational piece, cut into Zach Allen snaps a little bit because that is unsustainable, and develop him and then have him be a starter next season.
Yeah, as you mentioned on here, almost your entirety of your top 4 defensive linemen are going to phase out. And I can't imagine the Broncos, even though I don't think we talk about it enough. the return on investment of John Franklin Myers and what he did upgrading from, oh gosh, who was it last year that was there? Just absolutely horrible. I can't even.
Jonathan Harris.
Oh my gosh, not very good out there. But Walter Nolan can come in. He's going to hopefully eat into 100 of Allen's snap count. Guess what? If Allen played 100 less snaps this year, he'd still be the number one snap earner on the interior defensive line across the whole NFL, despite playing one less game than all those other top snap earners. So, as you mentioned in here, that's just something I've been banging the drum. Like, it's awesome that he's doing that. We shouldn't have to have him do that, and it's dangerous for him long term, in my opinion. Not health, impact, efficiency, all that. And also he can eat into a bunch of snaps from Jackson on the defensive line, who is like, he's fine, but Jackson didn't flash enough for me, tools wise, traits wise, that it's like you're going to worry about displacing him not being on the roster. It's like, we got him there. Okay. And like, God bless him. It's better than the depth we've had here on this offense for a bit, or defense for a bit, but not to this level. So yeah, Walter Nolan, I really need to work on getting his last name spelling right, because I always Nolan, not En. But he's a heck of a player. The only question for me, again, he's a little bit. I think he has didn't he have adequate length? I feel like his length. I was a little surprised. He's a little bit more of a 3-gapper than a 5 technique when you think about it. But Denver uses the 4-eye more 1-gapping penetration style. So like, is he going to anchor against double teams? Don't really have to as much with the penetration style defensive front. So I really like him. I think he's a top 15 player in this class. The real question will be football character stuff, anything on the background there. I think the tape to me looks so obvious of like a top 15 pass rush style guy. When I see Dane Brugler consistently have him on his big board at like pick 34, 38, that sends up a little red flag for me. Is there something in the background here? I'm not reporting that by any means, but when there's a discrepancy between obvious talent versus the big board, is there more to the story? Maybe we'll find out something at the combine.
Yeah, I mean, when I was watching the Senior Bowl shows and everything like that, I can't remember if it was ESPN or NFL Networks, but one of the guys, between one of them, did mention that there is some stuff with Walter Nolan that needs to go in, that teams will need to dig into at the combine, that teams are starting to dig into at the Senior Bowl. And that was like on day 1. And then on day 2, the same guy was in there talking about how the word that he has gotten has been that everything's clear there, and that we're going to probably start seeing him just skyrocket over the next few weeks in mocks and big boards, because there's a common consensus here that the media is about 2 to 3 weeks behind where the NFL is at. So all the positive stuff from the Senior Bowl, we'll start seeing that reflected here soon when we get to, these big mock drafts on NFL.com and big boards and stuff like that.
Yeah, without a doubt. So let's keep it rolling here. We have a same mock here, same pick here for the Broncos. TreVeyon Henderson, running back from Ohio State, came in, had an unbelievable freshman season for that team, looked like a superstar. 2022, he suffered a very serious foot injury, bone broken in his foot, as well as a ligament tear, I believe. Cost him 2022. He was never really right in 2023 either. And then 2024, splitting with Judkins in the backfield there, the other Ohio State back. Kind of came on a little slow this season, but then in the playoffs was unbelievable. Really good pass protecting back, pretty explosive player as well. Ohio State didn't really use him as a satellite player per se, where he's like playing as a wide receiver as well. Like he's an elite dump off option, right? But he wasn't out there running wide receiver routes. Not that he can't, because Ohio State's deep at wide receiver. But I mean, even G. Scott, their tight end, pretty good for like a 7th rounder or something. But that's Henderson makes a lot of sense here. It's all going to come down to health. And also, I see in the chat, happy birthday, Pearl. Sorry if I missed that here. Big 77. Never thought I'd get here with all my gals off horses. Well, thank you so much, Pearl, for coming in and spending your birthday here. And shout out to you, one of our superstars in here. So always supporting the show. So happy birthday, everybody in the chat. Let Pearl know happy birthday.
Yeah, we'd sing you happy birthday, but we don't want to ruin your day. So we'll just say happy birthday, Pearl. I hope you have a wonderful day. And congratulations, 77 years. Happy birthday again.
Yeah, thank you so much. So TreVeyon Henderson here. Obviously, could this be your Joker? Everybody drink, whatever. That's the buzzword. Everybody's already getting tired of it. But I think he's got the potential to be there. And at the very least, I think you still need a little bit of thunder, but he can be your lightning. If we're talking about modern day Sean Payton offenses, you probably look to the Lions, what they built there with Dan Campbell and Ben Johnson, and your David Montgomery to Jahmyr Gibbs. I think Henderson's got a chance to be a Jahmyr Gibbs role. Maybe not as explosive or a good of runner between the tackles as Gibbs can be, but the touches, the second back, a double, two-headed monster backfield, I think Henderson can be that guy.
Yeah, and I'm in agreement there. And part of it too is obviously with using the simulator, I'm going off of who was there. And mentioned round one that the big three weren't there. Well, at this point, it's I gotta find somebody who can fill that Joker role, which is just a mismatch. That's all they are. They're the guy who can create mismatches in the passing game for the most simplistic definition of it. And Henderson is one of those guys. I mean, you can use him in a variety of ways that I think Sean Payton wants to do. And you still have a guy like Audric Estime to bring that boom, bring that power that you need. And I mean, he still has to show a lot more than he did as a rookie. You can't have him fumble on, his first 9 carries again. But to the end of the season, he started to show more. So I was looking more for this explosive type who can fill a Jahmyr Gibbs type role, which is Henderson compared to a lot of the other backs that were still available at this point in the simulator. Plus, Henderson is one of my favorite backs in this class. I think if it wasn't for medical issues, I would not be surprised if we're talking about him being right up there with Ashton Jeanty.
He's pretty good. I do have some questions about the tackle breaking ability. He is somebody, I don't want to, throw out the name Tatum Bell, who never broke a tackle in his life in Denver. But I wish sometimes he'd, he's decently built, right? He's not like super thick, but 5'10", 208 pounds, I think is what he is. I wish he had just a little bit more tackle breaking ability, but his ability to bend upfield with there being any sort of space and turn that corner as a runner, not always think about it as a pass rusher, but as a runner as well, is pretty unbelievable. And again, it's not the only thing that matters about running backs, but gosh darn, if you don't have it, I don't want you. He might be the best pass protecting back in this class. Everybody's talking about, look how good the Chiefs did with Saquon Barkley, making him a non-factor. You watch Saquon Barkley's pass blocking reps and the big plays that came off of that because he picks up a free rusher, and tell me he didn't have an impact. It makes a huge difference, especially if you're coming up with a blitzing front that can break pass protection rules like a lot of defensive coordinators can today. Henderson, no questions there about pass protection.
And one big thing for me is his vision. Like, I think he's got some of the better vision in this class. Not the best, just better vision, and much better than what the Broncos have on roster. And I will tell you, I am tired of watching the Broncos running backs running into the teeth of the defense or into the back of their own offensive linemen. And Henderson, hopefully, with what we see in his college tape, won't have that same issue in the NFL.
Yeah. Well, moving on here, the Broncos 3rd round pick. Love the Travion Henderson pick. I think that's one that you're going to see pretty common here. Here's one where I'll say, I mean, again, you use a simulator to make it happen. I don't use a simulator when I do my mocks. I tend to look at the consensus big boards and think if a guy's within 10 or 15 picks of there, I can get away with it. I'll be surprised if Mason Taylor makes it here to pick 85, but for this mock before the combine, it's fine. It's fair. Denver's looking for a tight end. I like Mason Taylor, son of Jason Taylor, Hall of Fame edge rusher. I don't know if he was Hall of Fame. Okay. Really good edge rusher for the Dolphins. Good player for the Tigers, LSU down there. It had a decent Senior Bowl as well. He's not going to be overly dynamic after the catch. He's not incredibly dominant as an inline player, but he does just everything at a C+ to B+ level. And if you can do that as a tight end, if you're trying to run 11 personnel, 12 personnel, he's going to stay on the field. I do want to see his actual take on inline blocking get a little bit better. I feel like he's a little bit passive sometimes with his blocking. He's more of a wall off kind of guy versus a get his hands in there, combo block and drive. But again, smooth player, smart player. I also think very young, good frame. He's going to be very, very useful. So I like Mason Taylor here a lot. And at 85, that's a heck of a pick. I think shout out to Dane Brugler. I think he had the Broncos in his last mock going with Mason Taylor at pick 51. So this is good value.
So I also try to stick with some semblance of what I think will happen. So Nick Manowari, he's consistently there at pick 85. I don't think he makes it out of the top 50. So I'm not going to go with that pick. At this point, I can still see Mason Taylor being there And I don't think 2 weeks from now, I will be able to justify this pick here. I think he's going to have a better combine than people expect and kind of lock him in as a top 64 pick at the very least. I do think that there is a little bit more athleticism that you can tap into than he consistently shows. He's not, some supreme athlete, but he's got some stuff to work with there. And blocking, you kind of touched on it. For me, blocking is a big issue with him just because he doesn't have any of the technique down. He is very much I'm just going to get in your way and be a menace by staying in your way instead of I'm going to sit here and get my hands on you, use proper technique or even decent enough technique to kind of lock you down. But he's got enough there. He's got enough strength. He's got enough of that power, the core strength to sit there and develop and become a better blocker than he is. And, as you said, he just has enough there to be this all around tight end instead of really excelling in one area. And the Broncos can use a tight end like that still. I mean, yeah, you want this big receiver type who can, go make a ton of plays after the catch or with the ball in his hands, trying to get the ball in his hands. And at this point, there just wasn't one of those guys left. And so I just went with a guy who I think can really help raise the floor of the room. Maybe not this year, but next year, I think that he could have in 2026, he can have a pretty big impact.
Well, I like it a lot. Good player. I even think he's got a role this season. You need a why. You play him with Troutman. It's fine. Somebody that you really liked here. I remember you talking about him a lot during the Senior Bowl. We're on a round 4 pick here. Cody Lindenberg, linebacker from Minnesota. The Gophers don't like their coach, but he's done a pretty good job with that program out there. I'll continue to tolerate them as long as they lose to Iowa. But tell me about Cody Lindenberg. It feels like this is a solid linebacker class. You're not going to have, I think, many guys, true linebackers in the first 40 picks. And that's probably partially because the league is not good at evaluating linebackers, right? So they don't know who's going to be good or not a lot of times, seems like. I think Jalen Walker probably ends up edge. We'll see what happens with Jihad Campbell. But Cody Lindenberg, 4th round. I like him. I'm not sure if I love the value here. It depends on what else is on the board, but Denver needs a linebacker. And you talked a lot about the movement skills at the Senior Bowl. We've talked about it on here. The Senior Bowl is probably the worst format to evaluate running backs and linebackers because of what they're asked to do in actual games. It doesn't really translate to those one-on-ones, but if a linebacker can hang in coverage, there's at least some translatability to zone and whatnot. So tell me about Cody a little bit. It makes sense for Broncos. They're going to pay a linebacker. Even still, they need another one because Singleton's got 1 year left.
Yeah, I mean, the thing with Lindenberg is he is a cover linebacker coming out of college. His issues show up more in the run game. He isn't the best guy coming downhill, taking on tackles, shedding them, and making a play. He can sort through the trash decently well, but when somebody gets their hands on him, odds are he's going to be taken out of the play right now. Doesn't mean he can't develop and grow there. But he's an athlete. He was a two-way athlete in high school. He had the most catches on his team in high school, and then also played edge. He's very smooth with his movements. He has really good instincts and a good football IQ for not being a long-term linebacker that's played there for years upon years, going back to high school. And there's just a lot to like him. And when you look at this Broncos and what they really need, and watching what Cody Barton and Justin Strnad with how they had struggled last year in coverage, this is a guy that he was a little bit targeted specifically for what I see him bringing in as a coverage player at the NFL level. And I also do have to say, you aren't wrong. This is a little bit early even for me, but without having that 5th round pick, I don't think he's going to be there at the 6th. I'm not using trades yet in my mock drafts. So it was a thing of, I like this guy. I like what he brings. There are other players that were a little bit better, but not necessarily at a position that really needed to be targeted right now. So I kind of reached for the need a little bit on this one.
Makes sense. I mean, you got to call your guy out there. We'll see. And Denver's going to do some wheeling and dealing. We know that about Peyton. We know that about both Peytons. Naj comes in. Says, brothers, I ultimately think Nix is growing. Continue to fortify the middle of that D and running back are our best shots Super Bowl next season. What do you bros see for the next 2 years as far as development? He really needs to continue to work on his drop back pass game and also be a little bit more under control under pressure. I mean, the stats are the stats. I don't know if they'll be long-term, but last season, he was one of the worst quarterbacks in football statistically in terms of EPA per dropback under pressure. Now, that's something that can fluctuate year to year, but it's one thing that I think, like, everybody's up in arms about weapons, and I get it. We need to raise the offense, the ceiling, by adding some weapons that can take advantage of a lot of these passes. But I think that the floor for Nix is just as important in continuing to fortify and strengthen and have a perennial top 10 to top 5 offensive line, given his numbers last season were really bad under pressure. So those are the two areas I'm looking for him to get a little bit better. And I'm not, again, those are things, it's not an indictment on him long-term by any means. He had a borderline historic rookie season for a team that had a lot of holes on it. But a lot of it, I think, is tied to like Sean Payton and how good the offensive line is. So those are the big ones for me, just if continuing to grow in the drop back pass game, get a little bit better under pressure. I think those things can come. They should come.
Yeah, and to add on to that is there can be some improvements with reading zones. That was very hit or miss as the season went on. Really wasn't great to start the season. We saw improvement, so there's a lot of reason to believe that he can keep growing in that. And then his sense of pressure. There were times to close out the season, after he hurt his back in that Raiders game, especially, where there wouldn't really be pressure there, and you would see him kind of bail a little bit early on the pocket and just being a little bit more consistent with that as well. But as you said, I think that the Broncos have the offensive line in place to really help protect him. And if he can, cut down on the jitteriness a little bit, then he could really take a significant step forward with his growth and development, especially if he can add these playmakers. And then the last thing is his timing on those deep shots. We saw a lot of them get overthrown to Troy Franklin, especially, which was a little weird seeing their chemistry that coming into the NFL, having both played at Oregon. But it's just a matter of, adjusting to the NFL speed. So there's reason to believe that will improve too, because, Troy Franklin, there was an adjustment on his end with having to deal with some of the different coverages, sometimes dealing with press coverage, which he may not have gotten as often or as frequently in college as he did in the NFL. And that's going to throw your timing off. So all of this is, a lot of it is just lack of NFL experience at that speed of the game that, now that he has the season under his belt, should improve. And again, adding more playmakers to it should also help him improve.
Yeah, now we're getting into the Broncos 6th-round picks here. They got 3 6-rounders. We'll see where it is at the end of the day. Eric, I'm just going to read all 3 of these guys here quickly, and we can talk about one of them because we do want to run a quick simulator ourselves here today. So we got Willie Lampkin, interior offensive lineman from North Carolina, Chapel Hill, 5'11", 270 pounds. Weird player. Really fun to see him at the Senior Bowl take on Deion Walker. Low man wins, guys. They're giving up like 100 pounds there on Deion Walker. Low man wins. You also got a tight end that we've talked about a little bit. I really love the depth of this tight end class. Like Denver has to double up on tight end because one of these 6th-round picks, I think, has to be a tight end. There's just too many good options down here. You got Moliki Matavoa. You can have to help me with the pronunciation. I know he was a very high recruit at Oregon there, transferred to UCLA. He's good size, really good in finding soft spots in zone. I like him a lot. Despite his size, not really a good blocker yet, but I mean, the ability to be there with the size. He said that we'd say the same thing about Alberto Cuevas, though, so you never know. And then a guy that we've talked about a lot in the chat, you brought him up, and I'm like, oh yeah, Mel Kiper mentioned him last week, which is just, shout out to Mel, the Godfather. He's putting in the work. Efton Chisholm, wide receiver, kind of gadgety guy from Western Washington. So, you can talk about all these guys if you want to highlight one of them. I like all 3 of these picks. A 6th-rounder. I know the names. I haven't put in like the work on them.
Yeah, it was kind of funny because a little bit ago I think it was Quentin Caldwell in the chat brought up Efton Chisholm, and I was just smiling knowing what was coming. I love this dude. I would not throw Gadget around with him. I would say that he is more of that Wes Welker, Brendan Stokely type wide receiver. He's going to find the soft spot in zone. He's going to sit there and he's going to be reliable. He's going to get himself open. You can use him in some gadgety ways, but that is not how, I don't think that's how you're going to win with him consistently. But I'm a big fan of him. And even though he's a slot only type wide receiver, he is the type of receiver the Broncos can still use to help out Bo Nix and give him another reliable option to get open on critical downs. And then Willie Lampkin, I mean, I don't think he'll be there with some of what I've heard Dane Brugler say, Daniel Jeremiah say. These are guys they're talking about him as a team taking a shot at him in the 4th round.
Wow.
We talked about it before with Tez Johnson. He's historically small when it comes to being interior offensive lineman. And if somebody else wants to take a shot on it earlier, then they can. But at this point, I think you can get a decent player out of him with the ability to play as an inline tight end, That 6 tight end, you can use him as a fullback, as that big fullback, like Patrick Card type. If he doesn't work out at center, but he answered a lot of questions of his ability to work at center at the Senior Bowl, handling consistently Deion Walker, Cameron Jackson, these big nose tackles that are 6'6", 340 plus pounds. He's interesting to watch. If you want leverage, he is a leverage machine. It comes naturally to him. He's got a wider wingspan than Gray Zabel, who we're talking about in the first round, who just happens to be 7 inches taller than Lampkin is, and their arm length is about the same. So he's got a really weird body type with just not lacking the height or mass, but he makes it work for him. His technique is very sound. And again, just leverage. He knows how to use it and he wins with it consistently. There will be times where he loses, but it's not often he loses because of leverage. And then Mataveo, the tight end, as you said, despite his size, he's not a blocker. I was really disappointed with him when I turned him on, seeing his blocking. But he's another one of those guys that he can help Bo Nix, talking about him, having those issues with reading zone. Well, Chisholm and Mataveo, they can find the soft spots in zones and make themselves a target and then provide a little more after the catch to help pick up some extra yards. Not big after the catch players, but they can help a little bit.
As far as Lampkin goes, do you see any fullback, H-back ability? You mentioned the tight end stuff. The reason I ask is because not many teams use the fullback anymore. And what is it, like 6 teams use fullback prominently, Denver's being one of them. And 2 of the teams that have, I think, probably use fullback more than anybody, have fullbacks who are 300 freaking pounds. In the Ravens with Ricard, and also the Chargers this year with Matlock. I mean, both those guys are heavier than Willie Lampkin. So I'd be curious if he's also got some. Want to see how he tests. I'm curious if they'll actually have him out there in those drills.
He's not at the combine. He is not a combine invite.
You're right. Yeah. So that to me says that I don't know if he's going to go 4th round. If he's not even getting a combine invite. So we'll see. I think it's viable here. I know that a lot of people love the character of him as well, from what I've heard. So very fun. Make sure you guys check that out over on Mile High Huddle, Erick's mock. I also did a mock that was released Thursday. I'll just, mine, I can't even remember who I took, Erick. I took Trayvon Henderson in the 2nd round. The 3rd round, I ended up taking Joshua Farmer, Florida State, long 35 plus inch arm length, explosive, still pretty raw player. And in the 1st round, I ended up with Denver going with, that's right, Emeka Egbuka, who I think is one of the safest players in the entire draft. So you guys can check that out as well. We're not going to run through that today because we got a mock to run through. But yeah, Emeka Egbuka as well. So I went 2 Ohio State players and I got some weapons. Even though I've been banging the defensive line drum, its defensive line is a viable option along with offensive weapons. So we're going to run this mock draft here. Erick, you mentioned the PFF simulator. They're using Trevor Sikkema's board mainly for driving that, and shout out to Trevor. He does a good job, but he's lower on some guys. I prefer to go off the consensus board and the mock draft simulator. I don't think the actual mock itself is as good for variability, but I like the board more. So we're going to go with this one here. And I'm going to hit here, go run. I have it going fast, only 3 rounds. So you're not going to be able to show me up at the end of the draft. Just kidding. But we're going to sit here with the Broncos here. And I think this is pretty easy. At some point, we maybe have to, bypass some guys, say that they're gone or whatnot. But here, I think we got to make it easy. I think it is Tyler Warren. Yeah. I think the real conversation here, Erick, I think there are 3 first-round grade weapons in this class. And we know Sean Payton, he gets a little bit itchy hands, right, as the board falls to go up and get a guy. I'm looking at pick 15 with the Falcons. You have a history of Payton and Fontenot trading in the past to the Falcons general manager, and the Falcons are desperate for picks. So I'd be curious if the Falcons 20 plus 85 can get you up to 15 to get one of Genty, Warren, or potentially, I think Tet McMillan would be very interesting in this offense as well for a big slot player with his length, his Gumby-like ability to adjust. I think he'd be a real mismatch from 11 personnel. But I digress. We're sitting here at 20. It's got to be Tyler Warren, right?
Yeah, it is. And I mean, you touched on it with Fontenot. They also have him and Sean Payton have that long working history. He was the director of pro scouting for, I think, 7 or 8 years with the New Orleans Saints while Sean Payton was the head coach. So they've definitely got a relationship, and they've definitely got that ability to, talk and, communicate well, knowing each other, knowing what each other's wants and everything.
Mhm.
but to make a trade done. And Dane Brugler recently was talking about how he doesn't think necessarily a trade up might be needed, but you never know. All it takes is one team. And the Falcons are one team. I believe the Colts are another team that a lot of people are talking about looking his way. And that is the Jets as well in the top 10. I mean, he's been that's been a popular pick in, some of these NFL.com mock drafts.
Yeah, Tyler. I mean, tight end is always a little risky because the teams do not do a good job evaluating the haves from the have-nots. But Warren's size, the ability that he actually can be a Y tight end. So, like, I really worry about these glorified pass catcher tight ends because, like, are they actually better than receivers in 11 personnel? Most of the time, they're not. Like, I'd rather have Tet McMillan out there in the slot, or Jack Beck in this class, or Alec A. Manor, big slot as well. I think those guys are better than some of your glorified tight ends if you're not playing in line and actually dictating personnel. We got Gene coming in here over on Facebook, says, good morning. How are you guys? We're doing well. We're wrapping it up here pretty soon. He says, I'm hoping we get Cam Scatterbo. He's a beast. Yeah, Cam Scatterbo transferred to Arizona from Sacramento State, had a heck of a season. I'm always going to remember that Big 12 championship where he took belt to you-know-what against Iowa State, which warmed my Hawkeye heart. I do think that Cam is not an overly explosive athlete in the open field. I don't think he separates very well. My other issue with him is something that would drive Sean Payton to. I'm going to steal one of Sean Payton's line is you got to know when the ride is over. And Cam is trying to make every single thing a highlight home run, breaking tackles. And because of that, ball security is a real issue. He put the ball, I don't have the stats in front of me, but he was close to the NCAA leader in fumbles this last season. But he's somebody I think you're talking end of round 3 to middle of round 4. Good pass catcher, can do a little bit of everything. I kind of compare him to, I don't know if I've seen anybody else use this comparison, but I kind of compare him to Kareem Hunt outside of the fumble stuff. Kareem Hunt really protected the football. But as far as he's not like overly explosive, you're going to get a lot of doubles with him, but he's super useful. As a dump off option, he's going to be able to make a guy miss and get you 5-6 yards. So that's the comparison I've used outside the ball security.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen a lot of people talk about him as a day 2 guy, round 2, round 3. I think he has a chance to work himself into that round 3 conversation, depending on how he tests at the combine. That is going to be so critical for his evaluation of seeing not just the actual testing, but going through the drills, seeing his movement, how smooth he is as a mover. That is just going to be very critical for his evaluation of what you can evaluate, because you can't evaluate, the fumbling issues during the combine. That they don't have a drill for that, unfortunately.
They do not. We're on the board here again, pick 51 in the simulator. Eric, 2 names stand out for me. We already got our tight end, our inline guy. You can do Joker, do a lot of things. The one who stands out for me the most is Gray Zabel. We can talk about that in a second. You also have Travion Henderson still here, who makes a lot of sense for Denver. A little bit further down, you got defensive lineman. There's Carson Schwessinger as well. He makes some sense. But for me, I think we already got a weapon. I think Gray Zabel's got a chance to be a decade-long starter on this offensive line. You want to turn the weakest part of the offensive line with just 1 year of control left with Wattenberg. Zabel not only gives you an option at center immediately, but also left guard if you want to move on from Powers after 2025. He's hard to evaluate because his tape is at left tackle. It's FCS, whatever you want to call it, at North Dakota State. But I like him a lot. If you want to overrule me and go Henderson here, we can make every Bronco fan excited. But I need a little bit of meat and potatoes. I'm more substance than sizzle. I would want to take Gray Zabel here.
Yeah, I mean, I would want to take Gray Zabel, but I'll you have that conversation with Henderson of helping improve the running back room that's so desperately needed. And while Luke Wattenberg can be upgraded, I think he was at least serviceable. And you only have 1 year left on him. That's right. And then you also have Alex Forsyth, who, when he came in and started, was at least serviceable. And so I wonder how much the Broncos are actually looking at upgrading center instead of being fine with, letting Luke Wattenberg and Alex Forsyth compete it out again, and then rolling with the best one, and then bringing and seeing, Nick Gargilo also is a guy who can, I don't think he'll be competing to start, but he can play into that conversation next year when Luke Wattenberg is set to hit free agency. So I wonder how much they would look at Gray Zabel to upgrade their center room, even though they could definitely use it, because that was the weakest spot on their offensive line. And then he also has that versatility to move out to guard. You can move on from Ben Powers after the season unless they restructure his contract. And, he's giving you a 10+ year starter on the offensive line, I think, at the very least. I would go Gray Zabel, but I just question how much the Broncos internally would actually look at Gray Zabel with, the guys that they have.
Yeah, I think that it's a harder conversation at 20, but the value at 51 for me is too good to pass to give you long-term options. But Henderson, I mean, Hampton, Arroyo, those guys also make sense. It's if Denver misses out on the top 3 guys in the at pick 20, granted, maybe Arroyo or Henderson or Hampton work their way up to there before the draft. Who knows? But there's still options. But I really like Gray. And again, the center was by far the weakest part of this offensive line. And to make it go from just really fortify and solidify the line for the next year. I mean, it's something that Sean Payton has done time and time again as far as addressing the offensive line. So we'll see. Wattenberg is a jag. Let's just call it what it is. He's just easy to find. He's out there. Now we're on the clock here with the Broncos again. We got options. We got our Thunder runner here, if you want, Caleb Johnson, a little bit more predicated for zone, but he can run duo all day. Iowa actually transitioned to a mid zone this season, what functions a lot like duo as far as the guy's got great feet, really good pacing for somebody his size, like him a lot. Then you got your interior defensive lineman, Omar Norman Lott, Darius Alexander. You got down there. I really like Jared Ivey as well. Or you got Jack Betch, who we already talked about. So, gosh, out of the guys listed here, I guess I'll have to make a play for Caleb Johnson just to get somebody who can actually carry the rock there and be somebody to play action. He's so big. He's got such good feet. It raises the floor of the offense a lot, but I don't have an issue with the defensive lineman or Ivy as well, who I think Ivy is a heck of a 4-eye, some of the heaviest hands in this draft for this team.
Yeah, it's going to be all about Darius Alexander for me. I loved his tape going into the Senior Bowl. He came out and stood and was one of the best players at the Senior Bowl. He's just, we talked about it with my mock draft about the issues the Broncos have, the concerns they have over the contracts of their interior defensive linemen. Alexander, he's a guy, he can come in, again, help eat into the snaps of Zach Allen, improve over Jordan Jackson, sit there and develop in this more limited role as a rookie, and then compete to start next year when you're likely losing, at least one of, John Friggin-Meyer, Zach Allen, or Malcolm Roach. So I'm all for Darius Alexander. I also think that this, for the type of defensive lineman this Darius Alexander this isn't the best class for it. Well, this is a really strong running back class. And I know we're only doing 3 rounds, but, I'd be willing to take that type of defensive lineman now and wait and see what we can get in round 4, round 5 with running backs, and even be willing to double up on it just because of how much the room needs to. But again, this type of defensive lineman, there's not a lot of them in this class. I would take Alexander. And if you want to talk me into Ivy, I could see that as well. I'm not as high on him as you are, but I still think this is a range where I'd be fine with it.
All right. You also got Jordan Phillips down there still, the nose tackle, Joshua Farmer, another guy who I think he's going to test really well. Eric, I think he's going to test awesome. We'll go with this time, it's your first show. We'll throw you a bone. We're not going to fight about Caleb Johnson right now, even though I'm running it here on this side. We'll go with Darius Alexander for this one. I mocked him to Denver in my first 3-round mock with their 2nd-round pick. So to get him in the 3rd is great value. Darius Alexander, the one thing, negatively we will say about him is that he didn't always show up on tape, in my opinion, this season for Toledo. The game against, was it West Virginia? One of them, he looked like freaking Chris Jones out there. Not always showing up there, but the hands, the length. The other aspect that concerns me about him is he is very old. It doesn't matter as much for quarterback or some of these other positions. What is he going to be, 25, maybe even turn 26 his rookie season? He's pretty darn old. He was in the recruiting class before Bo Nix, I believe, coming out. So he's old for that position, which makes you wonder. He already looks pretty ready-made, but that's one of the things that might knock him down a little bit as well.
Yeah, that age is there. And then there's also some issues with his consistency against the run. You kind of talked about, that one game where he looked like Chris Jones. I can't remember who it was against, but I know what game you're talking about.
I think it was West Virginia.
I think so. I don't remember. But there's some issues against the run with his consistency. But, we kind of touched on it with Walter Nolan with the way that Vance Joseph uses his defensive front. I think it is a defensive front that can kind of hide those issues a little bit of Alexander. Not every single snap. There's still going to be times where it's still going to show up, but you can, hide it a little bit. And if you can get the right linebackers behind him, it also can help out a little bit, and you can, always grow and develop him. But yeah, Alexander, age, run, concerns, but I just think that the potential for what he can bring as a pass rusher is extremely valuable, especially at this point in the draft. As you said, you know, 51, that's where a conversation should be had for him. Really, I think he's going to test out really well at the combine for his size. And I mean, age, again, you can just keep going back to the age. It's a factor for him because he doesn't play one of these, you know, super valued positions, but interior defensive lineman is valued. And it's not like we do have guys who are playing 35 plus in the NFL on the defensive line pretty consistently. Most of them are these big nose tackle types, but it's just one of, I'm not super concerned about his age when we're talking 85th overall, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah, it might already be baked in to him being available at 85. Yeah. We got GGG coming in and says, welcome, Eric. Thank you so much for the super chat. It's ERICK, despite what my phone always tries to autocorrect it when I use voice to text. But you can call him whatever you want. You can call me whatever you want. You can call me Eric for $1.99. But I appreciate you, GGG. Julian asked, does age really matter if you get a quality player for 4 or 5 years? I think it's just worth discussing. You know, he's a grown man going up against 19, 20-year-olds at the MAC, and he should look like a developed player comparatively compared to some of those young guys at that level of competition, and he doesn't always. So I think it is just at least part of the conversation, Julian. But appreciate everyone. We got to wrap it on up. I got to get on dad duty. Eric's got to go get some sleep. Shout out to Naj coming in twice. Naj dropping the freaking dollar here, man. Thank you so much. Roy a couple times. Michael Ronquillo, of course, as well. Rattlesnake Master. Eric Flynn, spelled differently than your Eric here. Gene Williams, also GGG at the end there. You guys are superstars. Great. Appreciate you so much coming and hanging out. Make sure you guys are following Eric and I on Twitter. Eric's at Erick Trickel. I'm at Nick Kendell, MHH. Also follow us at Mile High Huddle. If you haven't done so yet, we're over on Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle and Facebook.com/Mile High Huddle pod. And as that ticker says there underneath, please click the thumbs up, guys. So we got way more viewers than thumbs up in here right now. That takes 1 second. We would appreciate it if you guys would do that. Or the laugh react, the hug react. I always love the care emoji reaction. So that's a good one too. Do that. Also subscribe, like, and share over on YouTube. That helps us a heck of a lot. Michael Ronquillo closing us out here. Says, great show today. Nick and Eric on Broncos for breakfast. Go Bo Broncos. Go all of you guys. Go Pearl. Don't get knocked off any horses. Sorry, Chad, running the show here. Happy 77th birthday. And unless there's another one that Chad was trying to pull up there we go. Gene, you guys all have a good rest of your day. It was awesome to tune in for a little bit. MHH for life. SEAL Team Knicks. Love it, Gene. Love you guys. Appreciate you, Eric. Fun first show. We'll see what Wednesday brings. Time to wrap it up. Continue to choose kindness and compassion, everyone. Go Broncos.